Hello, my name is Ian Contover, and this is The Current Buzz. Today we have Beth Pariseau. She's a writer for Tech Target. You might have not heard of Tech Target, because I never heard of it, but she writes about tech problems, IT problems, and what's happening in the business. So she's a graduate of Chelmsford High School, class of 1998, and she went to UMass Amherst, is that correct? And she graduated in 2002, English major. She interned at the Boston Globe when she was there, and what broke out there in 2002? Everyone knows.
Yeah, my first week in January 2002, the Globe printed the first of its Catholic Church Spotlight Team stories.
And were you surprised when?
Yes, that had been kept pretty well under wraps until the stories were written, because the paper was in litigation with the church to release documents. So that did finally happen before I got there. And then they had time to write and print up the stories, which that happened the week that I got to the newsroom.
Okay. So what happened at the Globe? I mean, you were there.
Yeah.
I'd like a little inside information on that, you know.
I was there at the now old Dorchester headquarters for the paper. Where they still, when I was there 20 years ago, they still had a printing press on site.
Wow.
And
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. They've since shut down that printing press and outsourced their printing, I think. But, you know, at the time, I thought, because my co-op semester, which is a program they have for college students to do work experience,
right,
started in January. And just a few months before had been 9/11. And I thought going in that I had missed the biggest news story that would ever come down the pike, you know, not getting there a semester earlier. And then lo and behold, a story came out my first week there that would end up becoming a movie.
That's
and
right.
Yeah, and what's funny about
Spotlight, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And what's funny about that is in the movie, they used part of that Dorchester office for interiors. So there's one particular scene where the actor playing Resendiz, the reporter, goes down this little ramp to a vending machine, and he's having trouble with that vending machine. And I remember that exact area of the building and having trouble with that vending machine myself. So that's about as close as I got to any of that inside story. Right. But I did get to meet Walter Robinson. I did a little bit of kind of did entry work for the Spotlight team. I got to see, you know, some of the major players around the newsroom, and you know, it was really cool to just be able to kind of be present there.
Yeah, definitely, especially in college. Did you get a lot of phone calls, pro and con?
I answered phones at the city desk. That was a big part of my job when I was a co-op.
All right. Well, that, of course, you get the phones.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was quite an experience. We did get a lot of calls, not so much about the Catholic Church story, because Spotlight team was a separate department. So they might have been routed differently, but we got a lot of colorful phone calls on that desk.
Colorful?
Yeah, some people treated us like a reference library. You know, somebody called us once who wanted to know who the pianist was in Casablanca. And when I hesitated, the person said, "Come on, I got a bet riding." I think they were at a bar or something.
Yeah, I think that's what happens. People call, you know, and you're the answer in regards to solving bets. I mean, that's happened to me before. I remember calling up a recruiter in his office, and we were arguing about a specific medal or something like that. Mm-hmm. It happens, I'm sure. No threats or anything like that?
Not that I ever received.
In those days, they didn't do that. You know.
I don't know about that, but I just never heard it. I mean, we definitely got some interesting people calling, but nothing serious.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So then you were at the Boston. Then you technically wrote for the Boston Globe.
I did.
The whole Sun.
I got some stories published in the Globe while I was there, but I wasn't the student writer. That was a separate intern position. But then after I graduated in what was then the worst job market since the Great Depression, and that's since been surpassed a couple times, but at the time it wasn't too great. I ended up working two jobs for a while. One was kind of a desk job, and the other was as a stringer or a correspondent for the Lowell Sun in 2003-ish to 2005.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that meant that I got to cover the 2004 World Series, the local reaction for the paper. So that was cool. Yeah.
So were you at the World Series for them? or
No, I was at bars in Lowell covering the local reaction. So it wasn't as glamorous as getting to go to the games, but it was still really cool. Yeah, it was still really cool. It was
For a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I remember after the 2004, this is an aside, but I remember people going to their parents' grave sites.
Sure.
And telling them that we won the World Series.
Yeah, yeah.
And put paraphernalia on the gravesite. It was funny. I think there was an article in the Lowell Sun about that too that I remember about it. So, all right, we go and then we move on to Tech Target.
Yes.
Right? How the heck did you get involved in Tech Target? An English major from the University of Massachusetts.
So, it's interesting because, again, this was also when print media was in sharp decline. And I think I kind of worked for a while with the idea that I would eventually kind of graduate to a staff position. But then I talked to someone who'd been doing the stringer position for 5 years, and I realized that in the event a job did open up, likely that person and maybe other people were in line ahead of me. So I actually put the word writer into monster.com, which also dates me because I don't think it's around anymore.
Okay. I remember the ads, monster.com, yeah.
And up popped a newswriter position at Tech Target, which was, at the time was in Needham, Mass, and now it's in Newton, local company. And I went in and interviewed, and the person that hired me liked my journalism experience and felt like I could probably pick up the tech as I went along. So in 2005, May 2005, I started as writing about data storage, so hard drives and, backups and that kind of thing.
So we're into tech, right?
Yeah.
You knew nothing like I know nothing in
Kinda,
tech
yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
And it's about 2005, and that's quite a long time.
It was.
About tech.
Eons in tech time.
Yeah, you've seen, because it's very fast.
Yes, yes.
And things are changing 24 hours.
And, that's actually getting faster. It's gotten faster since I've been in that industry. So in 2005, I was writing about things that were, physical objects spinning hard drives in a big, machine that companies managed. And then right around 2010, 2012, things started to become more software-based. They started to become more kind of, virtual. And the cloud, which basically means another company runs your machines for you, like Amazon or Google or Microsoft.
So when did the cloud come about? I mean, I remember hearing about the cloud and saying, where is it?
As early as the first tech bubble, there were some services that you could call kind of the early sort of proto-cloud. But I'd have to say, there were some early entrants. Google had a service called Google App Engine in the late aughts. Amazon Web Services started to, really emerge in earnest around then. I didn't start covering those companies and those services till about 2012. I, have moved from various subjects within the company, but cloud I started covering in 2012, and that was really when big mainstream companies, your insurance company, your manufacturing company, not cutting edge tech startups, started to pay attention to that.
Did that save them money by putting things in the cloud?
Sometimes, depending on the thing. It also, made things more flexible, so you can access, sort of like when you have an iPhone or and there's an iCloud service attached. You can access your
pictures,
things from anywhere.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about moving them from one computer to another. It was similar for companies that wanted to be able to, say, recover from a disaster in a building, or just have people on different sides of the country collaborate on something without having to pass it back and forth. They could have that service in the middle as a conduit.
Right. Who reads Tech Target?
We write for IT professionals. So we write for the people on the ground making this stuff work, which in the pandemic has really, I think its profile has risen even more because, Zoom, right, is a big part of what, kept business going.
Explain what Zoom is for some people who
Sure.
might not know what Zoom is.
Zoom is a video conferencing service. It's not the only one, but it's the most well-known. It's the most widely used.
Well used, yes. And that came into effect since COVID-19.
No, actually, Zoom existed well before that, but
Okay, I'm sorry, but more pronounced.
it was really in the spotlight hugely. And so the guys in the background, guys and women in the background of that service that took on an onslaught of demand for it during COVID-19.
Good point.
Figured out how to accommodate the exponential growth in usage on that platform and keep it working and make it so that, there were few outages in service when people really needed to depend on it. Those are the people that I write for and write about.
And they read your stuff and what's going on.
I don't know
so
about
they don't have time to read 140 websites.
No, but that's where the name of my company comes in. So Tech Target, we write targeted websites on different particular tech specializations.
Right.
So that helps people find those things in Google searches and also helps them narrow down to the things they want to read about that are relevant for them instead of kind of one big website where they have to poke around and find, say, the security stuff or the storage stuff. We have things segmented so that they can just pay attention to what's relevant to them.
I see. So it's, do you get any feedback?
Sure. Yeah.
And do they say it's wrong or do they say it's correct or?
I've been doing this again for eons in internet time. So these days it's less frequent, but I sure heard about any kind of corrections that needed to be made early on. Tech people can be very precise about terminology and about the way things work. And so, I hear feedback a lot, but what I try to do is talk with the people I'm writing for. So I talk with IT practitioners themselves to figure out what's going on.
So you call them up and talk to them and ask them what's going on?
Yep.
Or do you get tips in regards to what's
Sometimes.
going on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Call you?
Yeah, sometimes, I also work with a lot of market researchers, or they're called analysts. Firms like Gartner and Forrester, they also cover kind of the financial markets, but they have technical experts as well who I speak with a lot about these topics, what's coming.
Excuse me.
And what's popular. But yeah, I've gotten a few tips here and there from various sources.
So what happens when you get a tip? How do you work that out? Do you follow up on it?
Usually you got to confirm it. You got to get another source to confirm it. Ideally, you get some kind of documentation. Say if it's a product launch that's coming, you find something in black and white that says this is coming X date, what exactly it is.
Right.
And none of these are stories that like my parents are going to read. So even my
what? Say that again.
No, none of these are stories that regular people read. So even my biggest scoop ever, if I were to say what the headline was, it might be like so. But in this particular industry, it might be major news.
So you've been in this involved since 2005. So you were more or less in the infancy of all this.
Pretty much.
You ever think of writing a book?
I have thought about it. Haven't done it yet.
Okay.
But
There's still time.
Yeah.
You still have time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happens if you write a book, your name will go up into the Hall of Fame in Chelmsford in the library. They have a Hall of Fame of
Yeah.
all the authors. I think you should be there anyway, being a writer for Tech Target for 2005.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, I mean, that's important. So, COVID-19 came in, you go, yeah. It changed everything
It did, yeah.
in the tech world.
Yes.
All right, let's tell me what it's changed. And I mean, we have tech medicine, right?
Yep.
I mean,
I think Zoom is a good example. It was there before, but it became so crucial during the pandemic with people working remotely, kids doing school from home. Just the fact that we have broadband internet that can support that amount of video communication between people, whether it's, communicating with your family or with work colleagues or your child and their teacher, the fact that we have the internet to support that is has really shaped how the world has been.
wow. What if we didn't have the internet?
I don't know. There's some argument that people may have already gone back to more in-person activities, and there are pros and cons to that. But if we didn't, I think we would have seen a much more drastic economic impact.
Good point.
Or we would have seen more deaths because people wouldn't have been able to afford to socially distance and isolate and stay home. To me, I don't think it would be a good thing if we didn't have that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. So it more or less the internet saved the world. Is that what you're saying?
The internet and the essential workers who still had to do the work on the ground, whether it was delivery drivers or grocery clerks, I mean, healthcare workers, there were definitely people who were not able to stay home and who bore the brunt of that sacrifice. But for the rest of us who were in a position to work remotely or, teach remotely or, just kind of quarantine the best we could, I think that made a huge difference.
I have to give it to the teachers because it wasn't easy for them.
No.
At all.
No.
I mean,
yeah, I know some teachers currently, both my parents were classroom teachers. People used to think that I was going to become a teacher myself. And I, even, 25 years ago, I'd say nope, because I knew too much. Teaching is the hardest job I can imagine. And to the idea of teaching a hybrid classroom where some kids are on video and some kids are present, that's beyond anything I can imagine.
Believe me, it was very difficult. The teachers that I talked to,
Yeah.
I mean, they were exhausted.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. But for some people who couldn't safely be present in the classroom, it was huge to continuing their education. So both those teachers making the effort and the technology that let them reach those kids were major.
Right. Do you think it helped the kids? Let's say I'm in the 3rd or 4th grade. I mean, that's when you learn how to read and write. I mean, more or less you learn how to.
I don't really know, but I do think it's better than nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So
because basically the schools would have closed down.
Basically. Either that or there would have been more commingling because they couldn't close down, and that could have been dangerous for a lot of people.
Good point. And in regards to the parents would have had to stay home, it's a ricochet effect.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
So let's talk about COVID-19 in regards to businesses. What have you seen?
So before, again, similar to what I've said before the pandemic, businesses were working on what they call digital transformation, where they go from brick and mortar retail stores to selling things online. They go from, just walk up to a coffee shop and order a coffee to they have an app where you can order ahead and go and pick it up.
Right.
And that was happening. But COVID and the fact that many stores, restaurants had to either shut down completely or try to sustain themselves through things like curbside pickup via an app, delivery via an app, or move totally to a online business model selling things on the internet, usually via the cloud, meant that just exploded. The digital transformation was accelerated, moving to cloud services like AWS, Google, Microsoft, and others to facilitate that. All of that was the direction things were going, but it got a huge shove because of the pandemic, people having to stay home and, having to kind of communicate and conduct business remotely. Banks, for example, every bank had been working on offering online banking, right? But more advanced things, totally replacing their brick and mortar locations with online services.
Interesting.
Those were things that became much more crucial to staying in business during the pandemic.
Yeah, if we didn't have the internet, I think there would be very, very problematic problems.
Sure.
Regards to getting money out of the bank.
Right.
How do you do that?
Right.
ATM, things like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So because I know COVID has caused a lot of problems. What about people who didn't adapt? What happened
I can't speak to any statistics, but I don't think they fared well. I think, and what I have seen in my reporting is that the people who were furthest along before COVID hit were the best off in adapting to it. So in some ways, the rich got richer there.
This wouldn't have happened if we didn't have COVID-19 as fast as it did.
Not as fast. It was happening at its own pace. And then there became a little bit more stark separation between people who were already a ways along on this path and people who were lagging behind. People who were already headed in that direction and had gotten partway down the road were able to kind of catch up. And people who had started to lag behind their competitors, let's say, in doing this, were left even further behind. That separation between the cutting edge and the bringing up the rear became even more stark.
Let's talk about something that it has to do with COVID-19, also with cybersecurity. Oh,
sorry about that.
It's all right. It happens. Cybersecurity.
Yes.
Cybersecurity is.
So as more business becomes digital, becomes based in software and computers, cybersecurity becomes a more lucrative field for vendors, but also for hackers, for attackers and bad actors. There's much more money to be made by being a cyber criminal because so many more resources are there. Whether you are a vandal and you want to disrupt something and ruin people's day, or you want to steal personal information and sell it, or hold a company's data for ransom and make money that way. If you are of a mind to commit cybercrime, this is the golden age, because a lot of these businesses are new to this world.
Good
and
point.
Aren't necessarily anticipating how you might infiltrate them. And there's also there's such a learning curve between the way your organization functions when you've gone from a brick and mortar retail company to an e-commerce company. Adapting your business people to how that functions is a huge learning curve. And on the tech side, it's as big or bigger, because the technologies that you want to use to best take advantage of things like the cloud, the newest software development techniques that might make your app stand out from its competitors. There's such a fire hose of information coming at IT practitioners and business people who never had to deal with IT. IT was kind of in the back closet and they ran the computers and you barely interacted.
You had your son or your doing IT and that type of thing.
So now you have, CEOs that have to think about not just, am I going to make headlines in the Wall Street Journal because my stock cratered? They're thinking about, am I going to make headlines in the Wall Street Journal because I got hacked? And, these are all just huge shifts, as big as COVID-19, in terms of adapting business to the digital world, and security is a huge part of that. People are learning, and so they're going to make mistakes. And there are cyber criminals who've been part of this world longer than I have, who know all the ins and outs, who are going to pounce on those mistakes. And so, it's a really different